Hello. This class is the third in a series that we are doing on how to compose an original painting from a reference photo. I got this reference photo from Unsplash as a copyright-free image, and we have already addressed working from the background and then working from the foreground, and now this week we are going to zoom in on the middle ground and see how we could take this image apart, select only the middle ground, and make a new composition from it. If we cut the original image into thirds, eliminate the background, eliminate the foreground, then we will end up with basically a section like this. I think the trees and their shadows alone would be a wonderful subject as the main focus of a painting from this reference, but I did like the variety of different houses available. One possible composition would be to put a feature house in the lower right quadrant and connect other houses through the edge of the painting. Or take that same house and put it on the other side, on the left side, raise it up above the foreground just a little bit, and create a new composition. A third and unorthodox composition would be to place the subject right in the middle and then make it more of an elongated rectangle, not quite a total panoramic aspect, but closer to that. When I approach painting a snow scene, I have to remember a couple of things. First of all, photographs do not tell the truth. They tend to add dark values in the distance, giving too much information, when in truth the distance should appear to fade away. When you paint on location, the distance is softer than it appears in photos. I paint my distances wet and wet to keep it informative, yet soft and mysterious. Lose those edges. Here is a photographic reference of a snowy scene taken by Andy Evenson with some corrections needed. There are three obvious problems in composition from this photo. First, asymmetrical balance is better, so the farm is too centered in the photo. Then the three pieces of land from the background, middle ground, and foreground all end close to the same point. That makes kind of a geometric shape, since not enough variety is in the heights of the trees either, so we end up with some kind of an oblong, big mid-tone shape there. Here is Andy's solution. He's moved this farm slightly to the right, left a little bit less room between that and the group of trees on the right, and then he's alternated the endings of each landmass as it comes toward the foreground. Another of Evenson's atmospheric snowy scenes brings us into the middle ground with a very short foreground, and then ever so subtly in the middle ground receding backwards and backwards until it disappears into the snowy air. In this composition, the foreground saplings extend all the way up, overlapping the foreground, middle ground, and background. This unites the three planes of the landscape without taking away from the more interesting array of tree shapes in the middle ground. This textural monochrome has a focal point in the left middle ground. There is a trio of related tree shapes, one large mass, a medium-sized long tree line, and a smaller tree on the right. They are all interconnected by overlapping, but varied by their values and detail. The rhythmic zigzag movement in this semi-abstract composition eventually leads us to the focal point in the upper left-hand middle ground. See how some elements of all three of the previous compositions are evident here in this one by Pamela K. Wilhelm. Here we have a simple foreground, a middle ground of interesting trees, and snow shadows in the background. The beautiful calligraphy of this snowy tree line occupies most of the space in the upper third of the painting, and then the long backlit shadows bring us all the way down into this vertical composition. Prakashan Puthur uses figures as a focal point in another vertical tree line featured snow scene. Looks like there might be some ink involved in this mixed media as well. I was inspired by a photo reference similar to this. I love painting mountains, so it's no surprise that I reserved the peaks of my composition as the focal point in this painting. I think this panorama could possibly be two separate paintings. You could use the mountains as the subject, or you could use the figure. But if you put them both in, it seems that the action of the figure always attracts attention, and you need to loosen up and diffuse the edges in the distant mountains to create that focus on the figure. Here's a painting of mine in which I've used snow and the figure together. In another of my paintings, I'm using the foreground to lead you up into the eventual focal point. It's about the snow melt beginning to start at the end of the snow season, and so it gradually leads you upwards with increasing contrast and detail through the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, keeping the focal point at the middle ground with the tree and the figures. Speaking of figures as a focal point, winter is the perfect time to practice adding them to your paintings. The bulky layers worn in the frosty cold will help you simplify their shapes. This is a clip from a new tutorial on how to paint frost on my YouTube channel. As you see, every snow scene doesn't have to be totally gray or blue. You can use warm colors too. By the way, here were my streets at about 7 o'clock on Friday morning, and this was right outside my studio door as we started our Zoom class.